Blood drips from their mouths.
You're a Sinai.
More news from 6, but for now, hope you settled in for a spooky time with your favourite ghost hunters, because the Phantom Finds team are at it again.
Right.
Simon's voice cut across the driveway.
We want this in a single take, okay? No cuts, just walk and talk.
I know what a single take means, Simon, Ian muttered, flashing his director a withering smile. A stiff breeze rolled across the moors, ruffling the crew's hair and sending leaves dancing across the gravel at their feet. Just out of shot, Ian's co-host Claire sat on the steps of the Phantom Finds van, struggling with the lid of a coffee thermos, while their camerawoman, Philippa, fiddled with a box of lenses. Alex, the sound technician, dressed this morning in a Phantom Finds branded hoodie, caught Ian's lingering stare and lifted the boom mic higher, flashing an apologetic grin. Ian scowled. Amateurs. Simon lifted his hands for quiet.
Ready, everyone?
He called.
Ready,
Said Alex. With a sigh, Philippa shouldered her camera and nodded.
Ready.
Good. And action.
Ian adjusted his lilac suit cuffs, meeting Philippa's camera with a charming smile. Fellmore Hotel, he began, motioning to the building looming behind him. Built in the late 1700s, a monument to the wealth and privilege of decades past. Over Philippa's shoulder, the bulk of Fellmore rose against the skyline. A monolith of pitted marble and crumbling brick, 5 floors of glittering windows and gabled facades, sagging under the weight of itself. If nothing else, it made a magnificent backdrop. Ian clapped his hands, preparing to walk at a brisk curve towards the hotel entrance. Now locked to the public, Phantom Finds has tonight been granted unique access inside these rotting walls to finally answer the question. Simon reappeared over Philippa's shoulder.
Great, yeah. I'll cut you there, Ian.
Ian dropped his hands. What is it, Simon?
All good.
Simon spread his arms in a conciliatory gesture.
Just like a certain sparkle, you know.
No.
Why don't we try it with Claire in front of the hotel?
Claire jumped to attention at the mention of her name, almost spilling coffee down her blouse.
sure.
She squeaked, hurriedly flattening her hair. Simon turned back to Ian.
You all right with that?
Oh, fine. Ian waved a hand, anger and humiliation rising in his gut. Claire was a new addition to the show, just one of Simon's special little ideas to bring Phantom Finds back to the glory days of its early seasons. A fresh face with a fresh new smile, someone to contrast with Ian's gray-haired dignity, as Simon had so diplomatically put it in the week they started filming. Someone to contrast with a drastically cut paycheck, more like. Philippa flashed Ian a commiserating glance as she followed Claire across the drive. Ian scowled. He'd heard the two of them arguing again last night, their raised voices piercing the hotel's paper-thin walls. Philippa had spent the morning maintaining an air of brisk professionalism, while Claire's breezy brightness had acquired a sharp new twinge. They weren't fooling anyone. Ian slumped against the van, fumbling in his pocket for a cigarette. Bloody Simon and his stupid bloody show. There had been a time when the name Ian Sinclair would have sold any show on television. Back in the 80s, he'd achieved near godlike status with his garish day-glow suits and winning smile. Now, here he was, 3 marriages down and child support draining every bank account. A D-list presenter on a D-list ghost hunting show, surpassed by a wide-eyed director and colleagues barely out of drama school. What a joke. Up by the hotel entrance, the crew had gathered to reset the shot. Claire stood awkwardly, letting Simon fuss around her like a small red-hatted dog, while Philippa and Alex checked their equipment. Fillmore loomed behind them, the eternal 6th participant, its windows winking like the eyes of some vast brick insect.
Okay,
Claire tugged self-consciously at her jumper.
from the top.
From the top!
Simon beamed. Alex gave her an encouraging smile. Philippa flashed a non-committal thumbs up. Ian took a long drag of his cigarette, watching the smoke curl away into the slate-gray sky.
And action.
Fillmore Hotel,
Claire jolted into motion.
built in the late 1700s, a monument to the wealth and privilege of decades past.
Ian caught her gaze as it darted towards him. He returned it coldly.
Now locked to the public, Phantom Finds has tonight been granted unique access inside these rotting walls to finally answer the question,
She paused, her smile tightening.
what can we find?
Simon beamed. Alex winced. Philippa rolled her eyes. Even Ian could muster a twinge of sympathy. The catchphrase had been Simon's idea, a series of words nobody in the history of acting could force to sound natural.
Situated on the edge of Fell Brook, North Yorkshire,
Claire continued.
Fellmore crumbled as its residents departed. Although many have expressed interest, none have yet braved the depths to restore this ruin to its former glory.
Claire faltered.
And yet something.
Philippa muttered.
And yet something remains.
Claire continued.
From footsteps heard by night watchmen who complain of being followed down dark, winding halls, to teenage trespassers who claim to have seen images of themselves sprawled across the hotel walls, to ghostly lights and laughter reported by locals. Perhaps tonight we will finally encounter the spirits of Fillmore Hotel and unlock its mysteries.
Simon clapped his hands.
Cut! Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant.
Was that okay?
Claire asked, grinning nervously.
Perfect.
Simon made a mark on his clipboard.
Very nice. Very, pretty.
Claire's smile faltered. Oblivious, Simon waved them towards the hotel doors.
Let's head inside, people.
He called.
The owners were adamant we only film during daylight and only on the ground floor, so God knows what we're working with.
Why only daylight?
Asked Philippa, as Simon pulled out a set of impressive metal keys from his coat pocket. Simon shrugged, inserting one of the keys into the door's rusting lock.
Loose floorboards, leaky roof. The mysteries of health and safety continue to baffle and alarm.
He gave the doors a push. They opened with an alarming creak, revealing darkness on the other side.
Hey, Ian,
Simon turned to the van.
good to go?
Ian stamped out his cigarette with a grunt and levered himself off the van. As he made his way across the driveway, a flicker of movement caught his eye. Ian squinted, his gaze drawn to the windows studding the hotel's front. Someone was standing at a window on the 3rd floor, staring out across the grounds. It was too distant to make out anything but a pale smudge, a hint of purple behind the grimy glass, but the shape was unmistakably human. As if sensing Ian's stare, the figure shifted. Ian caught a flash of fleeting white, a pale hand lifted in greeting, a smile that cut the figure's face like an open wound. Frozen in shock, it took Ian a moment to realize what he was actually seeing. A bowed window frame, warped with age and neglect. Ian's own reflection, angled from above so that it appeared to be watching him, a flash of lingering smoke forming the ghost of a smile. Ian shook himself. Stupid. He was being stupid. Wouldn't Simon just love it if he reported seeing something on a shoot? Ian Sinclair, spooked by a shadow. Ian adjusted his cuffs, tugging at his shirt collar, and stared across the drive once more. He looked again. The window on the 3rd floor stood empty. The mirage was gone. The hotel door sat atop a set of pitted marble steps, flanked by a pair of weathered stone lions. Claire was standing on the top step as Ian approached, fiddling with her clip-on mic. "Very pretty," Ian muttered as he passed. He saw Claire stiffen. It was a nasty, pointless little comment, he knew, but the figure in the window had spooked him. He needed someone to make miserable, to remember this was his production, made famous because he'd willed it. Not Simon, not Claire, not Alex or Philippa. Ian. Claire's expression of tight-lipped hurt followed Ian through the doorway into the hotel. Ian blinked, caught off guard by the sudden darkness as he stepped over the threshold. Gloom and space stretched away ahead of him. A smell like rotten vegetation assailed Ian's senses, spiked with something both loamy and metallic. The lobby of Fillmore Hotel occupied a vast chunk of the ground floor, stretching upwards into a cavern of rotten plaster and glinting marble. A huge central staircase dominated the back wall, leading to a series of curved balconies along the 1st and 2nd floors. Doors led off in all directions, some hanging open into distant rooms, others wedged shut and thick with moss. A combination of leaves and broken glass crunched underfoot. Sunlight spilled through a crown of windows on the upper landing, dappling the shadows and spiking the air with gold. Claire slipped past Ian without a word, her gaze fixed upwards. Up ahead, Alex had paused on the checkerboard tiles to stare around themselves in awe.
"Oh, wow."
They breathed.
Brilliant, isn't it?
Simon grinned, his voice and footsteps echoing as he bounded across the lobby floor.
Look at that banister. Those tiles.
He glanced at Philippa, who was inspecting a stream of faded graffiti across the crumbling walls.
Think we'll get good footage?
Philippa shrugged.
With adequate lighting,
She said,
we could get the night vish stuff from the van. But if we're not shooting after dark,
How many cameras?
5 standalones. And this baby here.
Philippa patted the unit on her shoulder.
Then I'm thinking 1 down here. Maybe 1 in the ballroom, 2 on the upper floors.
Alex raised a hand.
I thought we weren't allowed on the upper floors.
Simon flashed them a wink.
Alex, what H&S don't know won't hurt them, okay?
Ian resisted the urge to point out that health and safety would know once the episode aired. There was no use arguing with Simon in this mood. Simon bustled off across the lobby, cooing over patches of rubble. Ian sat down at the bottom of the grand staircase.
Big place,
Said Alex, leaning on the banister with a nonchalance Ian didn't believe.
Why'd it close?
After Claire, Alex was the youngest member of the crew. Wide-eyed and eager to please, they reminded Ian too much of the fans he often met at conventions, so excited to be part of the show, so happy to be here. "Usual story, I imagine," Ian muttered. "Business dried up and people moved on. The family wound up in tax trouble, so nobody wants to buy it." Alex regarded him curiously.
Is all that stuff in the script true?
They asked.
People being followed, those kids with the graffiti, all the freaky bits later on about bedroom mirrors.
Ian's lip twitched. "You read the scripts?" he asked.
You don't?
Asked Philippa, coming up beside them. "It's my job to read them. Why'd you bother? It's all just nonsense from Simon,"
I think they're pretty cool, actually.
said Alex. Philippa shrugged.
I only read Claire's parts. To help her practice.
Claire stood alone amidst the remains of a glistening chandelier, staring upwards into a gaping hole left in the ceiling. If she heard them talking, she was trying very hard to pretend otherwise. "Yeah, Well, Ian muttered, given my luck, it'll all be Claire's part soon. Philippa's eyes narrowed.
Hey,
She hissed.
it's not her fault Simon's a prick.
Oh, is that what you were fighting about last night? Ian shot back as Alex reddened. Philippa flinched. She opened her mouth to retort.
Right.
Simon bounded past them up the stairs.
We're being thrown out at 9, which gives us exactly 4 hours to film. So let's get a standalone on the first floor. Maybe see about finding that ballroom.
Ian slicked back his hair, flashed Philippa a grim little smile, and rose to follow. The stairs creaked under his own weight. Ian frowned. What the hell was Simon playing at? He consoled himself with the knowledge that if he did fall through the floorboards here, he'd know exactly who to sue. He was halfway up the stairs when Alex's tentative voice came from behind.
You right, Claire?
Ian glanced over his shoulder. Claire had paused on the bottom step, staring across the marble floor, her head cocked as if listening for something. She flinched and turned at Alex's voice, her expression a mixture of surprise and bewilderment.
Did you hear that?
She asked.
Hear what?
Asked Philippa, with a hint of impatience. Claire turned back to the lobby. The space stood empty and silent, save for the group's plodding footsteps and the distant rustling of trees.
Nothing.
She said, flashing a hesitant smile.
Probably just a bird.
Alex waited for Claire to join them before walking again.
It's weird in here, isn't it?
Ian heard them murmur.
I thought I heard something on the drive. Like a whisper, you know? And did you see all that broken glass downstairs? Where do you think it came from?
Ian rolled his eyes and kept climbing. Above them, Simon had already reached the top of the stairs.
See?
He stamped triumphantly on the mold-thinned carpets.
Safe as houses.
In varying shades of reluctance, the rest of the crew joined him. Around them, the landing split off from the first of the 2 long balconies. Doors led away in all directions, overseen by the row of grime-covered windows.
Right, let's see what we're working with.
Simon marched to a door and shouldered it open, revealing a long, dark corridor of hotel bedrooms. Brass numbers gleamed in the shadows. Patches of carpets echoed across damp floorboards. No windows here, just skeletal light fittings and the distant suggestion of sunlight. Simon rubbed his hands.
Talk about atmosphere.
He turned to Philippa.
Do you think we can get away with natural lighting?
Look,
Said Philippa, heaving her camera onto the landing.
just how deep are we actually going inside this place?
Deep as we can get away with.
I'm serious, Simon. This equipment's not light enough for...
Did anyone else see that?
Asked Claire. They turned. Claire was staring down at the balcony to the next row of doors.
See what?
Asked Philippa. Was it a ghost? Ian asked, his voice laden with sarcasm. Claire reddened.
I saw something.
She insisted, pointing to the furthest door in the row.
Over there. A person.
Simon pushed to the front of the group.
I certainly hope not.
He said.
Are you sure?
Alex craned to look.
They were just standing in the doorway, watching us.
Ian hoped his expression didn't betray his sudden flash of unease. Nothing. It was nothing. He'd seen nothing in the window, and Claire had seen nothing in the doorway. Maybe she'd seen more on the steps outside than she'd let on. Maybe this was her idea of revenge for the petty little comment, once again making him feel old and stupid and superfluous. Oh, for Christ's sake! Ian strode across the balcony to the door Claire had indicated, opened it with a shove and glared inside. Beyond the door lay a small square room, empty save for a pile of curling wallpaper in one corner and the remains of a rusted TV set in the other. 2 dusty windows looked out across the driveway and fields beyond. Nothing here, Ian reported. Of course.
Good lighting, though,
Said Philippa, glancing over his shoulder. Simon gave a breathy snort of relief.
Well, I think this bodes well for the shoot. Don't you?
Claire frowned.
But I definitely saw.
She began. Philippa rounded on her.
For Christ's sake, Claire.
She snapped.
There's nothing here. Can't you just drop it?
Claire shrank back, her jaw tightening.
I'm sorry.
She said, straightening her shoulders.
I think I just need a moment.
She turned on her heel and walked stiffly away down the balcony, before breaking into a stumbling run as she reached the doors.
Claire!
Philippa jolted after her.
I didn't mean...
It was too late. Claire had already vanished through a distant doorway.
Jesus Christ.
Simon jerked a thumb in Claire's direction.
Philippa, go after your girlfriend, please. Make sure she doesn't fall through the floor.
Philippa shot him a poisonous look, then set down her camera and hurried off after Claire. Ian heard her calling Claire's name as she vanished into the gloom.
Well, that's just great.
Simon muttered.
No presenter and no camera woman.
We could always record some voiceover for Ian.
Suggested Alex, with a nervous smile, looking visibly shaken from Claire's sudden departure.
I've got stuff in the van.
Oh, right.
Simon looked at Ian as if he'd only just remembered he was there.
Of course.
There was a thud of running footsteps as Philippa reappeared in the corridor entrance.
She's gone!
What do you mean?
Said Simon.
She can't have gone that far.
I walked to the end of the corridor. She's not there!
Oh, for God's sakes, Alex.
Simon nodded in the direction of Philippa.
Help, will you? We've only got this place for a few hours.
Alex flashed Ian an apologetic glance before resting their boom against the wall and hurrying away across the balcony. Their footsteps faded as they rounded the corner into the darkness. Simon gave Ian a resigned grin.
Meet back in 15 minutes,
he said, checking his watch.
I'm sure one of us will find her.
Sure, muttered Ian, staring back down the stairs towards the lobby. I'll get right on that. As the rest of the crew made their way into the hotel, Ian sauntered across the lobby towards the front doors. The others could find Claire in their own time. He needed a smoke. At some point, after they'd entered the building, the front doors had swung shut behind them. Ian tried the handle. It wouldn't turn. He rattled it, in case the mechanisms were stiff. But still, nothing happened. The doors were locked. Ian rolled his eyes. Simon must have triggered a deadbolt, letting the door slam shut without checking they were properly secured. If Ian had any hope of getting out of here, he needed Simon's keys. Ian shot an irritated glance over his shoulder, but Simon, Philippa, and Alex had already vanished through their respective doors. Simon, he called. His voice echoed up into the lobby ceiling, swallowed by the shadows. Nobody replied. Standing alone, the lobby seemed so much bigger, so much emptier. A soft breeze rustled the trailing ivy. Shadows gathering in distant doorways seemed to take on the appearance of watching figures, waiting in readiness, silent and still. Ian turned from the door and stomped across the lobby, forcing the images from his mind. How many abandoned places had he visited over his career? How many supposedly haunted castles and manor houses and B&Bs? The only thing that made Fellmore any different was that he'd been abandoned inside it, left alone by an incompetent crew and an even more incompetent director. Forget any supposed ghosts. That was the true horror here. Picking a doorway that looked vaguely like the one Simon had vanished through, Ian set off into the gloom of Fellmore Hotel.
The hotel was produced by the story studio Hawk Cleaver. To support the studio in this and all of our productions, please consider becoming a TOS Plus member over at theotherstories.net/plus or a patron over at patreon.com/Hawk Cleaver. The Hotel was written by Georgia Cook, produced by Duncan Muggleton. Justin Fife plays the role of Ian. Georgia Cook plays the role of Claire. Erica Ventura plays the role of Philippa. Safia Ingar plays the role of Alex, and Luke Condor plays the role of Simon. The hotel theme music and soundtrack were created by Duncan Muggleton, and sound effects were provided by freesound.org. Georgia Cook is an illustrator and writer from London. She has written for publications such as Baffling, Visterion Lit and Flame Tree Press, as well as a Doctor Who range with Big Finish. She can be found on X at Georgia Cooked or on her website at georgiacookwriter.com. The Other Stories is a production of the story studio Hawk and Cleaver and is brought to you with Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives License. That means don't change it, don't sell it, but by all means share the hell out of it. So, until next time.